Picture two gardens, two houses apart. Same soil, same June sun, same amount of water every morning before work. One looks fine, green, tidy, doing its job, the kind of garden that gets a polite nod from someone walking past. The other looks like it's having the best month of its life, the kind that makes people slow down and actually look. Same effort, completely different result. And the gardener with the first garden has no idea why. Walk past the first garden and nothing's technically wrong. The plants are alive, the beds are tidy, everything is present and accounted for. Walk past the second one and something else is happening. The kind of growth that makes you want to ask what they're doing differently, even though, on paper, they're not doing anything you haven't heard of before. Something most people never check. By the third week of June, the soil 8 inches down can be 10 degrees warmer than it was at the start of the month. Almost nobody measures that. But that single number can quietly close a planting window the seed packet swears is open for weeks longer. I'll come back to that, because it connects to something almost nobody explains about gardening in June. For the next few minutes, I want to walk you through 3 layers. The first is what every checklist already tells you. The second is what experienced gardeners quietly do instead. And the third is the layer that decides which of those 2 gardens yours becomes. The layer almost nobody talks about. Let's start with the layer you already know. Even that one has more underneath it than most people realize. Every June checklist says roughly the same 5 things. Water deeply, early in the morning, so roots get it before the heat does. Mulch to hold that moisture and starve out weeds. Deadhead anything that's finished blooming, so the plant spends its energy on new flowers instead of seeds. Watch for the first aphids and slugs before a small problem becomes a big one. And feed whatever's working hardest. The tomatoes, the roses, the hanging baskets. Because June is when they're using everything they've got. Maybe you've heard some version of that list a dozen times. Maybe you're already doing most of it every single week, and your garden still looks fine. Not bad, not thriving, just fine. Every one of those instructions tells you what to do. Not one of them tells you when your garden actually needs it. That's the gap, and it's bigger than it sounds. Take watering. The checklist says water deeply in the morning. But what if it rained heavily 2 days ago, and the soil 6 inches down is still holding that moisture? Watering on schedule that morning doesn't help the plant. It can work against it, encouraging roots to stay near the surface, right where the next hot afternoon will hit them hardest. 2 gardeners can follow that exact list on the same morning and end up with 2 completely different gardens by the end of the month. Not because one of them did something wrong, because one was responding to a calendar and the other was responding to the garden. Or take deadheading. The checklist says snip off spent blooms to keep flowers coming. But deadhead a plant the day after a big flush, while it's still putting energy into the seed heads it just formed, and you're fighting the plant's own timing instead of working with it. Wait a few days, until that energy has already started shifting toward the next round of buds, and the same snip does noticeably more. The instruction was right. The moment was wrong. Quick one before we keep going. What does your garden look like right now? Drop your growing zone in the comments. I read every one. It took me years to actually notice this. 2 gardeners can water the exact same amount on the exact same day and still get completely different results. The difference isn't the water itself. It's where they check before they decide to use it. The gardener getting better results isn't reading the surface. They're checking where the roots actually live. A dry-looking surface can hide moist soil underneath, and damp mulch can hide roots that are already running short of water. The checklist gardener waters what they see. The experienced gardener checks what the plant is actually experiencing. Why would someone deliberately cut back a plant that's blooming beautifully in June? It sounds backwards, but experienced gardeners do exactly that with certain plants, right in the middle of the month. Cut back 1/3 of a healthy, flowering plant now, and in 2 or 3 weeks it comes back fuller and bushier. It returns loaded with new buds, right as the first flush would otherwise be fading. The timing matters more than the cut itself. Too early, and the plant just regrows what you removed with nothing gained. Too late, and there isn't enough season left to recover and rebloom. The middle of June, for a lot of flowering plants sits right in that window. Late enough that the plant has energy to spare, early enough that it has time to use it. There's a moment, just before a perfectly healthy lettuce turns bitter and shoots a tall stalk up the middle that almost nobody catches. That's called bolting, and by the time you see the stalk, it's already too late. The early signal shows up days before. The center leaves start growing upward instead of outward. Catch that, and you can harvest while the flavor is still good. Miss it, and a week later, it's gone bitter for good. Why does one tomato plant become a huge leafy monster that barely produces fruit, while another produces heavily all summer? The answer is often feeding. A plant putting on leaves needs something different than a plant putting on flowers, which needs something different again than a plant putting on fruit. Feed a tomato plant like it's still in its early growth phase once it starts flowering, and you can end up with a huge, leafy plant that produces almost nothing. The plant did exactly what you told it to. You just told it the wrong thing. Why do two plants of the same kind, growing 3 feet apart, end up with completely different amounts of disease by the end of June? It's rarely the soil. It's usually the air. As June gets more humid, the space between leaves matters more than people think. A plant that's been allowed to get crowded, leaves overlapping, air barely moving between them, holds moisture on its leaves long after the morning dew should have dried. That damp surface, for hours at a time, is exactly what fungal disease needs to get started. Thinning a few crowded stems, or giving plants a bit more breathing room than feels necessary, can be the difference between a plant that sails through summer and one that's fighting disease by July. One more, and it surprises a lot of people. Why do plants watered every single day sometimes end up worse off than plants watered every 3 or 4 days? Frequent, shallow watering trains roots to stay near the surface, because that's where the water always is. Those roots are shallow, and shallow roots are vulnerable the moment a hot, dry stretch hits and the surface dries out fast. Less frequent, deeper watering forces roots to grow down, chasing moisture further below the surface, and a plant with deep roots can ride out a hot week that would stress a shallow-rooted plant within a day. The plant getting watered less often, in this case, is often the one better prepared for what June has coming. Most gardeners don't lose plants because they water too little. They lose them because they water before the plant actually needs it. There's a final piece here, connected to that soil temperature number from the start. I'll come back to it now, because once you see it, the rest of June starts to make a different kind of sense. Everything so far has been useful. But if you've ever looked at someone else's garden in July and wondered why it suddenly pulled ahead of yours, this is usually where the difference started. This next part is the layer almost nobody talks about. Take that soil temperature number from earlier. Seeds don't read calendars. They read soil temperature. Below a certain point, a seed simply sits there, doing nothing, no matter how long you wait. But the part that surprises people is this. Above a certain point, some seeds, especially the ones that prefer cooler soil, stop germinating evenly, even while the air still feels like perfect planting weather. By the 3rd week of June, soil that's 10 degrees warmer than it was at the start of the month can already be too warm for those seeds, regardless of what the packet says. The seed packet doesn't know your soil. Your soil does. This is worth sitting with for a second, because of what it means practically. If you've been told you can keep sowing certain seeds right through June, that's true for some plants and not others, and soil temperature, not the calendar, is what decides which is which. A quick check, pushed a few inches into the soil, tells you more than any date on a seed packet ever could. Something strange happens to fruit trees in June, and most people panic when they see it. A noticeable number of young fruit suddenly drop to the ground, seemingly overnight. The instinct is to water more, feed more, assume something's wrong, and try to fix it. That drop is usually the plant fixing itself, thinning its own load down to what it can actually support and ripen well. Stepping in often pushes the plant to hold on to fruit it was never going to ripen properly anyway, at the cost of the fruit that would have been excellent. And to be clear, this isn't a sign of poor care. It's often a sign the plant set more fruit than it could finish, which is a good problem to have, even though it doesn't feel that way while you're watching fruit hit the ground. The most useful response, in most cases, is to keep watering and feeding at the steady pace you already had, and let the plant finish making its own decision about what it can carry. If your tomatoes are loaded with water, they taste like water. There's a reason for that, and it points to something useful. A short period of controlled stress, letting the soil dry out a little longer than usual for just a few days, tells the plant to stop diluting and start concentrating sugar into the fruit instead. The word that matters here is controlled. This isn't neglect, and it isn't letting things wilt and hoping for the best. It's a small, deliberate gap, applied to a plant that's settled in and fruiting well. Done at the wrong time, on a young or struggling plant, the same technique sets it back badly. Done at the right time, it's one of the simplest ways to noticeably improve flavor without changing anything else about how you're growing it. Your plants are already telling you something is wrong, hours before you'd notice it any other way, if you know when to look. Leaves that curl inward at midday, but look fine again by evening are usually just managing heat, and that's normal. Leaves still curled in the cool of the morning are saying something different. That's a plant under real stress, before it shows in any other way. Most visible damage has been building for days. The plant tried to tell you first. There's a strange side effect of all this heat, too. Walk through your garden in the brightest part of the day, and you'll often diagnose problems that aren't really there. Plants that look droopy and stressed at noon can look completely fine again 2 hours after sunset, with no intervention at all, because midday wilting in a lot of plants is a temporary, protective response to heat, not a sign that something is wrong. Walking the garden early morning or evening, when plants are in their normal state, gives you a far more accurate read on what actually needs attention. And most of the damage happening to your garden right now is happening after dark. Slugs, earwigs, and a handful of others do almost all of their feeding once the sun goes down, and they're gone again by morning, long before you're out there with your coffee looking for the culprit. A 5-minute walk through the garden after dark with a flashlight will tell you more about what's actually happening to your plants than a week of daytime inspections. Once you start seeing your garden this way, one more thing becomes obvious, and it's the piece that ties everything else together. Go back through everything we just covered and watch how it all points to the same thing. The soil temperature isn't a random fact. It's the garden telling you a shift has already started underground before you can see it anywhere else. The pruning works because, mid-shift, the plant still has enough spring energy left to redirect, but won't for much longer. The bolting happens because certain plants treat that same shift as a signal to stop growing leaves and start making seed as fast as possible. The fruit drop is a plant recalibrating how much of that shift's output it can actually support. The stress watering technique works specifically during this window because it's exactly when the plant is primed to respond to a small signal by shifting resources toward fruit. Even the leaf curling and the nighttime pests are part of the same season, with heat and pest pressure both building as this shift speeds up. June isn't a maintenance month. It's a transition month. Every plant in your garden is moving, right now, from spring's job to summer's job, from putting on growth to putting on flowers, fruit, and seed. That move doesn't happen on a date. It happens at a pace set by heat, light, and the plant itself. And that pace is a little different every year, and a little different in every garden. None of this means throwing out the checklist. The checklist still tells you roughly what your garden needs in June. What it can't tell you is when, this year, in your garden, under your weather. That gap is exactly where the difference between the two gardens from the start of this video lives. The checklist gardener treats June like a list of boxes to tick on schedule. The gardener with the thriving garden isn't working from a better checklist. They're responding to a shift that's already underway, adjusting almost daily to where their garden actually is, instead of where the calendar says it should be. That's the whole difference. Not more effort, not more product. A different relationship with timing. If you want one simple way to start noticing this shift for yourself, it's the same soil temperature check from the beginning of this video. 5 minutes, once a week, with a thermometer pushed a few inches into the soil near your most important plants. You'll start to feel the transition happening in real time, instead of just reading about it after the fact. And that's the difference between following June and actually understanding it. If working with what's happening in front of you, instead of a fixed schedule, makes sense to you, that's exactly what next month's video is about. July is where this transition either pays off or quietly falls apart, and almost nobody talks about that part either. Go back to those 2 gardens from the start. Same soil, same sun, same water. The only real difference between them was which one was being watched and which one was being scheduled. None of the 5 things on that original checklist were wrong. They just needed a different kind of attention behind them. The kind that comes from watching, not from waiting for a date to arrive. That's the layer nobody talks about. Not a better checklist. A better conversation with the garden you actually have.